everyone. Welcome to our first ever Rare Impact virtual mental health event. I am so excited for you to hear from all of our expert speakers and partners here today. Mental health is personal for me, and I've always hoped that by sharing my own story, using my platform, and working with an incredible community like all of you, we can help others feel less alone and access the mental health care they need. Education around mental health is something that I deeply care about and believe in, wishing I had it while I was growing up as well. That is why today I'm so excited to kick off Your Words Matter, our Rare Impact educational campaign to guide you on how to share and how to respond when talking about mental health. Because the stories that we share, the words that we use, and how we each respond matters. When I launched Rare Beauty, I wanted it to be so much more than a beauty brand. I wanted it to be a platform for creating community, connection, and mental health resources for young people. And that's what Rare Impact is. I also wanted to make sure there was a long-term commitment to making sure everyone had access to the mental health support that they need. And we aim to do that through the Rare Impact Fund. I am incredibly grateful that you are here today to take part of such an important conversation to drive change around mental health for young people everywhere. Thank you, guys.
There's really no good way to follow Selena Gomez. Hi, everyone. It's so great to be with you all today. My name is Elise Cohen, and I'm the Vice President of Social Impact and Inclusion at Rare Beauty. And in this role, I also oversee the Rare Impact Fund. At Rare Beauty, we call all of our social impact work Rare Impact. And thank you all so much for being here for such an important conversation that is core to our mission at Rare Beauty, increasing access to mental health resources and education. Rare Beauty was founded in 2020 with a mission to help everyone celebrate their individuality by redefining what beautiful means. With a focus on addressing self-acceptance and mental health, we want to give people the tools and resources they need to support their mental health. From the products we make with uplifting names like gratitude and joy, to the community we create and the resources we share, addressing mental health is built into the DNA of our brand. At Rare Beauty, we believe mental health is an essential part of overall health and well-being, and that it affects everyone. That's why Rare Beauty also launched the Rare Impact Fund to expand mental health resources for young people. And at Rare Beauty, 1% of our sales go to support mental health through the Rare Impact Fund. And we also raise additional funds with corporate partners, philanthropists, and our incredible community, like each and every one of you. Since launching, the Rare Impact Fund has disseminated more than $2 million to 13 incredible organizations working on the ground to bring much needed mental health services and education to young people. But this is just the beginning. In addition to the Rare Impact Fund, Rare Beauty works with amazing partners, mental health professionals, and experts to bring the critical conversation of mental health to our community members like each of you to drive change and share resources. We do this through our social media channels, our newsletters, and intimate community and influencer events. But today, in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month and to kick off our Your Words Matter campaign, we wanted to bring some of these incredible experts to all of you. Your Words Matter is Rare Impact's educational campaign to guide you on how to talk about, share, and respond when talking about mental health. You'll learn more about this today and as you follow along our social channels throughout the month. Joining me to share more of this campaign, I am so excited to introduce you to our Rare Beauty Mental Health Council member and campaign partner, Tremaine El-Amin. Tremaine runs on Chai Tea. She's a well-being and health equity strategist and proudly serves as a member of the Rare Beauty Mental Health Council. As the Client Experience Officer for Mental Health First Aid USA, a public mental health training program of the National Council for Mental Wellbeing, she has contributed to more than 2.5 million individuals being equipped to recognize signs and symptoms related to mental health, substance use, and suicide across the country, including training our very own Rare Beauty team. Tremaine, thank you so much to you and the team at Mental Health First Aid for being a partner in this campaign. We are so grateful to launch Your Words Matter with you and shed light on how the words we use, especially when talking about mental health, have more power than we may realize. Whether we're speaking or responding, it's so important to be mindful of word choice. And I know day in and day out, you teach so many people about this through your work and your trainings. Can you start by sharing with everyone a little bit about the purpose behind this campaign? Why is word choice so important when it comes to mental health?
Well, listen, Elise, first of all, thank you. You are more than welcome. We're so honored just to be a part of this. First of all, I saw people joining from all over the world, and so excited about the work that Rare Beauty and Rare Impact are doing. And what I would say about this campaign, it's more like an invitation, really. We're inviting people to slow down. We're inviting people to be intentional, to understand that what we say has power, just like what we do, and especially when it comes to mental health. The campaign, the Your Words Matter campaign, is really about, I think, at least, ensuring that we choose our words carefully as we talk about mental well-being, but it's also about sharing that our small changes, the little things that we do, small adjustments in our conversations can create so much room for someone to say what's really happening for them, or for us to catch up to ourselves and be more willing to acknowledge our own state of mental well-being, and then talk about these topics that for too long, have been so taboo in our communities.
I love that. Thank you. And we talked, and a lot of the resources that we created together, they talk about a couple of things. It talks about person first language. It also talks about, what are some common ways in which the context for certain words really matters. I think there's sort of two different things we've been talking about a lot in the development of this campaign, how no one's defined by their illness, and a simple change in language can help us destigmatize mental health around that piece. And then this second piece around how we've started to normalize throwing around words that are actually clinical terminology, and they really contribute to increasing stigma. Can you talk a little bit in more detail about person first language, and also how we've normalized as a society, and how we really need to think a little bit more intentionally about the way we throw around words that are actually clinical words that can hurt someone?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I love about what we've been able to discuss and to create is this opportunity to think about, what are we saying day to day, right? If we think about, I always use the example, sometimes we might say things like, oh, this weather is so bipolar, or use another clinical term in ways that don't really support a community or individuals in our community in being their full selves, and being able and comfortable to talk about the challenges they really are facing. So when we exaggerate by using these clinical terms, we may be well-meaning and have, this opportunity to have more colorful language. But if we aren't using those terms in ways that support rather than harm, then we can do damage, and unknowingly. And so I think that's part of what we train in mental health first aid, is to make sure that people know which words to use and then when to use them. I think both of those are critically important.
I love that. So we talk a little bit about, and I know you do in mental health first aid, how to recognize or listen to someone's story and respond. And, if we're hearing someone misuse a word, what is the way to kindly sort of respond and help? I think everybody here today wants to be part of okay, we can be mindful and really work on our own conversations and our own words, but how do we also influence others when we're hearing stories or we're hearing things be thrown around and we actually want to contribute to educating even more people? What's really the right way to respond and to help influence? So many people here have large platforms, or even if we're talking to a friend or family member, the impact is just the same.
Yeah. I think I love that you said, impact, because that's what it really is about. And as I think about it, it's about where that foundation is. And so at National Council for Mental Wellbeing, we really look at mental wellbeing as thriving regardless of a mental health or substance use challenge. And so helping folks to choose their words is what we do, as you mentioned, through mental health first aid. But I think also one of the opportunities we have is to do so with kindness. That's another word that stuck out to me that you said. We don't have to call people out in a way that is not helpful. And so one of the things that, we're all influencers in some way in our own spaces and circles, right? And so just our adjustments on a day-to-day basis, if you think about it, asking someone, how can I support you? Creating the conversation and the space for those conversations to happen. I've been guilty of it. I talk fast, Elise, you know that.
We all have been guilty of it.
And so I've been guilty of getting really excited if I'm talking about well-being or community impact or equity and inclusion. Like those are my subjects. Oh, and carbs. Carbs is my.
We know you love carbs. We know you love this conversation.
and so I've been guilty of my head going slower than my mouth and, wanting to take those words back. And sometimes the damage has been done. So it's really, really important that we look at this as a journey and not a destination, just like the recovery journey. We're on a road together of learning. And so it's really important that we keep that in mind.
I love that you said we're on this journey and kind of all about being mindful and thinking. I know that later in this conversation, when Jay Shetty joins us, I know he has some of these guidelines for what you think about before you speak. That I think will be really, really valuable to this conversation. So I love that you said that. Well, I want to thank you so much for helping us kick this off. I am going to turn it over to you for our next session, which I'm so excited for. And I will see you all in a little bit.
Thank you so much, Elise. I'm excited. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I was so energized by our discussion. So thank you. So really looking forward to our next conversation, y'all. So excited that you're all here and joining us. And I'm excited to bring up 3 incredible speakers for our Ask an Expert panel. We get to hear directly from mental health experts, the first 2 of which are Rare Beauty Mental Health Council members, and we'll learn ways to share about our own mental health stories, as well as destigmatize conversations around mental health. Today, we are joined by Dr. Jessica Gold, psychiatrist, professor, and director in the Department of Psychology at Washington University School of Medicine. We're also with us is Dr. Mark Brackett, founder and director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence and author of Permission to Feel. And we're thrilled to be joined by Sahaj Kohli, speaker, writer, and founder of Brown Girl Therapy. Please welcome our esteemed panelists. We can't wait to get started. Go ahead and give them some claps and everything in the chat. Welcome to you all. Hello. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So today, as Elise and I were discussing, we're learning how much our words matter, right? Especially when it comes to our mental health. Each of you works with a variety of people across age, identity, culture, and backgrounds. So why are words so important to mental health? This first question, by the way, is open to everyone. So it'll be great if you share a little bit more about yourself with the community that's gathered with us today as well. Who wants to start?
I'm trying to be a gentleman here.
I was letting Sahaj go, but I'm failing.
I can go. I can start.
Wonderful, Sahaj. Kick us off, Sahaj. That's awesome.
All right. I am really excited to be here. So my name is Sahaj Kohli. I am the founder of Brown Girl Therapy, which is the first and largest mental health community for children of immigrants living in the West. I am about to finish my master's degree, so I have been working as a therapist in training. I'm also a former journalist. I worked in journalism for about 7 years, so my passion lies at the intersection of narrative storytelling and mental health. And so as a former journalist, as a now therapist, I practice as a narrative therapist, and I really do value the words that we use and the words that my clients use to talk about themselves. I think for the population I work with, children of immigrants and immigrants, often the people I work with are straddling two very different cultures, two very different norms, two very different value systems. And so it can be really difficult to feel like you're getting all of these externalized messages, and those develop into these internalized messages and stories that we tell about ourselves. Often what I see is these stories are peppered with shame, with self-blame. And so it's really important for us to interject kindness and compassion in the way that we talk about ourselves, the ways that we talk about mental health, and the ways that we talk about other people. As small as it seems, like you were saying in the introduction, it really can make such a significant impact on our mental health and the ways that we feel a sense of belonging in our relationships and in the systems we live in.
All right,
Okay,
Dr. Jessica Gold, go ahead.
Okay. Hey, so I'm Jessie Gold. I'm a psychiatrist. For those who don't know, because I think it's kind of confusing, that means I went to medical school and can prescribe psychiatric medicine. I also primarily in my clinic see college students and healthcare workers, and also am a writer too. I did it the opposite way though, where I went to the medical path first and then started writing. I think words are really important because it's hard to get people to want to ask for help anyway. And so if the words make them feel for some reason that there's something wrong with them for asking for help, or they have a weakness for asking for help, or whatever label that puts on them in their communities, if they already have that, why would they want to ask for help? So I think the words we use can make it easier for people to feel comfortable actually just saying like, something's wrong, like I need to talk to someone. And I think that's really important.
Absolutely, absolutely. And rounding us out.
Yes, thank you. So for me, it's funny, when I was listening to your introduction, all I did was regress back to my childhood, because none of you know me, but my day job is I'm a professor of psychology at Yale. And my other job is I run around the world trying to get people to talk about their feelings. And what I find is that most people just don't have the language. They don't have the words to communicate clearly. I'm fine, I'm okay, I'm busy. But really, how are you feeling? And just briefly, I grew up in New Jersey, and I had a pretty tough childhood, meaning that I was abused as a kid. And I had two parents who loved me, but they didn't really know anything about emotional intelligence. However, I was blessed, believe it or not, by an uncle who was building a program to teach children emotional literacy. And when I was 11 years old, I had an uncle who was sitting with me in the backyard, and he looked at me and he just said, "Mark, how are you feeling? But really, how are you feeling?" And it was that moment that everything was able to come out. And he wasn't judging me for what I was sharing. He didn't say, I can't handle it or toughen up. It was all about listening, being compassionate. And honestly, it started my whole career as a psychologist. And what I've learned is that most people just don't have the words. And so my career has been supporting people in building their emotional vocabulary and then learning the strategies to help them manage the full range of emotions.
Okay, Mark. So just saying, that's powerful. And so incredibly helpful in helping us understand, why you're in this field, unknowing your why, right? And I think that's incredibly powerful and important. I think all of us have that. We have this reason we do what we do and what we're motivated by. Could you continue to talk to us about that a little bit? Your work at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence and your book, Permission to Feel, really do give people that deeper insight into the world of social and emotional understanding. And so that embracing of feelings. You're the emotion scientist, I saw. So as the emotion scientist on our panel today, could you share a few things that we should consider as we approach these conversations about mental health, either in school or at work or in our communities, with coworkers, colleagues? Those relationships are different. So can you give us some perspective and a few things that we should consider?
We have a whole day for this, right?
Right. I mean, only 2 minutes, but just
exactly. We have 2 minutes of like figuring this out. But the first thing is, I just want to say up front that none of us is born with this knowledge or this skill. There's no area of our brain that has like emotion language and evidence-based strategies to help us regulate our feelings. I didn't know what that was until I was in graduate school, to be honest with you. And so we need to just make these concepts available as early as possible. That means the parents who are giving birth to children and raising children, the teachers who are, raising kids in a different way, communities. And with that said, I think the first step is giving ourselves the permission to feel. And so, going back to my own story, the abuser in my situation threatened me. I was silenced. And so imagine what it's like for a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old or a 15 or 20 or 40-year-old to be restricted in articulating their experience. It's awful because it leads to suppression, repression, depression, the list goes on. And so for me, that's the first step. And then the question is, well, who are these people? And what I found in my research is that there's 3 core characteristics, plus many others. They show empathy, they have compassion, and they are non-judgmental. And so those are kind of the core characteristics of these people in our lives. And then, it moves on to being curious as opposed to critical about emotions, getting that language right. So ruler is the framework that I use, which is recognizing emotions, understanding their causes and consequences, labeling them with precise words, being comfortable expressing those feelings, which takes discernment, by the way, because when I ask you how are you feeling, you have to trust me.
Yeah.
I'm gonna listen and be there for you. And then finally, those strategies that help us to regulate our feelings. And we're finding that this is where people really fall short. People just haven't learned and practiced really helpful strategies. I'll stop there.
Yeah. I mean, I think all of those are so critical, all of those strategies and knowing what to do. It just ties in so much to what we talked about earlier and the skills and things that we can learn by doing trainings, et cetera. And we do that. And you mentioned, Mark, that was in, you were experiencing that or getting aware of those words in graduate school. And Jesse, you work with college students. And so I think it would be great to hear from you. I know you work with college students and healthcare professionals that support youth and young adults. And so that perspective, there's often significant stress that is happening during that time. But how can we recognize and really support someone who might be experiencing a mental health crisis situation, right? And not just naming those feelings, but they might be in a crisis, or if maybe it's me and I know I'm struggling, but I don't know where to turn, where to go first. How do we use our words to really deal with crisis situations?
Absolutely. So thanks for asking the question. And also thank you, Mark, for sharing. I think it's really hard to share something like that in front of people, especially honestly as a professional in the field. So thank you for doing that. I think when I think about how you're in crisis versus not, I think it's hard to exactly give you a definition or say like, this is how you know at this moment that you need help. But I think a lot of what it has to do is change over time and how long it's been. So if you've been struggling with your mood, like, identifying your feelings, like Mark said, and you repeatedly feel sad, and it's been a while, meaning not a week, but weeks, or it's changed and it's gotten worse, so you're feeling sadder, as an example, I think that is a good way to kind of know that something's more severe or that you're more in need of seeing someone like anyone on this panel for, mental health help, or, me, which would be kind of a bit further along depending on need for medicine. But I think, when you're talking to someone about their struggles and what they're going through, I think the most important thing is just to be there for them. So I think people really want to give advice and really want to say, well, when this happened to me, I did this. So that can be helpful, but sometimes people just want you to listen. And sometimes people have never said anything to anyone before. Like, this is the first time they've ever told someone they're struggling, but they are really struggling, right? And so being there for somebody and just listening is a big thing. And you can often say something like, would it be helpful if I gave you advice afterwards? And actually using our words to make sure that we're not giving someone something that they don't want or that would feel invalidating in a way to them. So would it be helpful if I helped you? One of the ways I think it's most helpful for people when you're the friend or the family member is it's really hard to make phone calls and ask for help, right? Like, we basically say, you're struggling, call all these people when you're sad and have no energy, or you're anxious and don't want to pick up the phone and talk to people, right? So if your friend is struggling, one of the things that is a good thing to offer, if you can, would be helpful for me to call some of those people with you or call some of those people for you. So it's not such a big burden. And so I'm here for you, and you know that you ask for help and you can actually find it.
Yeah. Yeah. Asking for help and actually find it, right? That's such a key component of that, Jessie. Sahaj, you are helping people find that help. And then you're training to help people get help, which thank you. And shout out to all those that are doing the work in communities, but also hopeful that you're taking care of yourselves, because it's such a need right now. Professional help is available and needed, but it's not always available or needed, right? And so we need some of the helpers to be in this other space, and we need that help to be culturally relevant. And so, Sahaj, in your work with Brown Girl Therapy, you really highlight and address the unique experience, as you mentioned, of children, of individuals who've immigrated from another country. What can you really, if you had to, in a soundbite, because we can do a whole presentation, y'all, just the four of us for 3 days. I kid you not, it could happen. So Sahaj, if you could tell us, what are the things that we can do at the start of a mental health journey, especially for those who might have the lived experience of being a child of an immigrant, especially for those who maybe don't know what to say or where to start based on what their cultural experience and what brings them to where they are?
Yeah, I definitely do presentations on this. So I'm going to try to keep this short because I can talk about this forever. I will say, I myself, as a child of immigrants, I am the first in my family to be born in the West. I am the first in my family to seek therapy, speak about my mental health openly. I am the first in my family to marry outside of race, religion, culture. So I understand what it's like to be the first in your family navigating these systems and these differing systems, and trying to figure out what it means to feel a sense of belonging and acceptance amongst all the people that you surround yourself with, including your family and your friends and the people you're socialized with. When, over a decade ago, I did experience something traumatic myself. And when I was living at home at the time, I really needed to seek a therapist. And it was the first time my immigrant parents had ever even heard the words mental health. They had been living in the country for about 20 years. I had been born here, I had been raised here, but it was the first time that they even understood what therapy was. My dad is a physician. He understands what psychiatrists do, but he didn't understand that you would just go see a therapist to talk about your mental health without it really needing to mean that something is quote unquote wrong with you. And so I had to firsthand navigate this cross-cultural communication with them. My parents were taking my struggles, my hurt as something, a reflection of them, that they failed me as my parents, when in reality they didn't, right? We can only protect the people we love as much as we can. We can't protect people beyond what they will experience out there in the world. And so I had to navigate this cross-cultural communication where, in the Western world, in the world, the systems I'm socialized in, we are very explicit and direct, and we have paper trails. We are very communicative in a lot of ways through our words, whereas in the culture I was born into and raised with at home, we're very implicit. We use nonverbal. We don't really ask explicitly. We make assumptions. And so I had to navigate this situation where I felt like I almost had to prove what I was going through and the struggle I was feeling. And I think that was the first step for me for realizing how important language is, but also how important it is to kind of even be able to identify what we're feeling, like Mark was saying, even having the wherewithal and the language and the knowledge, the emotional knowledge to say, I'm sad, I'm hurt, I'm struggling. That was not something my parents had the privilege to ever be able to explore as immigrants. They moved here, not with a lot of money or resources. I definitely have more resources than they do. And I see that a lot with children of immigrants. It's something I like to call as thriver's guilt, this idea that we feel guilty because we have access to so many more resources and opportunities than our parents had. And so we feel almost ashamed and guilty for trying to self-actualize, for trying to reach out for help. When in reality, that is, it's a privilege, it's also a burden, but it's something that we deserve. And so beyond thriver's guilt, I also see the concept of gratitude shame or toxic positivity, spiritual bypassing, this idea that we should feel ashamed for struggling because maybe our immigrant parents or our ancestors who lived through colonialism and war and poverty had it worse. So therefore, there's this binary thinking that, oh, since they went through X, Y, and Z, I can't struggle. I have so much privilege compared to get them. So I should just be grateful. I should just suck it up. I should just put my head down. When in reality, pain and suffering are not a competition. Both things can be true at the same time. Our parents can have their own struggles. Our friends can have their own struggles. And we can have our own struggles. You can appreciate and respect what your parents have done for you, and you can wish that they had done more or that they had resources to understand your struggles better. So finding community and safe and psychologically and emotionally safe relationships is key, right? So you can do this through your friends. If it's not your family, it might be friends. It might be social media platforms like Brown Girl Therapy. I mean, I created this platform out of selfish reasons, first and foremost, and then it grew into something much greater for people to be able to connect with one another and see themselves kind of reflected in the mental health content. It's really hard to feel like you deserve quality care when the care isn't speaking to your struggles. And so really trying to find that community is the number one key to feeling less alone and being able to ask for the help that you might need.
Yeah. You said so much. And two of the things that I think really, first of all, folks in the chat are going in and really excited about all the things that all of you have been sharing. And we're going to give an opportunity. So make sure you're submitting those questions because we will give an opportunity for us to have that dialogue directly with our panelists. Two of the things that all of you are really have tied into, Sahaj from a creating a platform standpoint, Jesse from the population that you're focused on and who you're supporting, and Mark, your engagement with young people as well. There are some exchanges that are happening digitally when it comes to these words, right? If we think about these spaces, and that's one of the things that I love about Rare Impact and Rare Beauty and the creation of this community where it really is a community. It really is coming and being connected and not feeling, that is real, right? So with everyone on social media, with everything that's happening, do you have any strategies specific, or let's choose one. Let's choose one strategy specifically. If you had to choose one strategy for coping with the pressures of social media, because we have those positives of community building, but the pressures of social media. If you had to choose just one thing to share and navigating that, and, I think Sahaj, you're navigating that role model kind of, piece and title, well, having your own struggles, right? Jesse as well. How do we do that? And deal with, and what's that one strategy that's your go-to? I keep saying one because we don't have a lot of time, but you all are amazing, and I want to make sure people have one and we can get to some of their questions. So let's see, Mark, let's start with you.
I'll tell you my one strategy, which is I limit how much time I spend on it, because I have addictive qualities to my personality. And, I wake up in the morning, the first thing I look at is how many people like that post. That is not healthy. I know it's not healthy, but yet I do it because you become programmed. And so even with the news, there's so much horrific stuff happening, but you don't need to be reminded of it every 8 minutes. You can summarize it at the end of the day and process it with a partner or with a friend. And so to me, it's all about setting limits for myself.
Excellent. Excellent. That limit setting, those boundaries are really important. Jesse, you want to talk about this one?
Sure. Quickly for me, it's really like identifying the fact that it actually affects me and I can have feelings about it. So we're speaking a lot about, putting words to things. So I tend to get a lot of physical symptoms from social media, like grinding my teeth, not sleeping well, just feeling really angry and agitated. And I throughout the pandemic was just like, I must just get angry when I watch and read things, but turns out I don't have to, right? So you can do a Mark said and have limits, but I think you start by actually realizing like it has an effect on you and it can affect your physical and emotional health.
I love that. Fun fact, you don't have to. Fun fact. So definitely really helpful. Sahaj, what's your one thing?
My one thing is just remembering information asymmetry. So what that means is we know everything about our lives, the good and the bad, and we only know the good about other people's lives because that's usually all they will share on social media. So I have to constantly remind myself that I don't know everything that's going on in people's lives. I am only getting the filtered, beautiful version of it. And that will help me because, like Jesse is saying, identifying what I'm actually feeling. Sometimes I find myself feeling really inferior. Why am I not doing that? Why am I struggling so much? Why have I not, reached this milestone yet as these people I'm seeing? But we are all on our journey, and just remembering that I'm getting half of the story online has helped me put things into perspective.
Yeah, half, maybe 10%, right? You may be seeing just 10% of that person's life. Mark, you were going to add, yes.
I was going to add, something I've been thinking a lot about as we've been having this conversation is, the title is Your Words Matter. And I think that your words matter also in terms of the words that you use to describe your feelings in that moment. I grew up with a lot of negative self-talk because I had a lot of bullying in my childhood. I'm gay and I was bullied because I was too feminine as a kid. I was bullied because of lots of different things, my physical appearance at the time. And, and what happens is that just like cancer, that metastasizes, right? As other people are defining your reality for you, right? You're too feminine, you're too fat, you're too dark, you're too light, you're too whatever. You start believing it and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so I think that we have to really become skilled at pausing and monitoring the words that are coming to ourselves from ourselves, after that happens and recognize that we need to shift in the direction of self-compassion as opposed to continuous self-criticism. And I think we need to spend a lot more time on that at home with our friends and communities.
Yeah, self-compassion. Oh my. Speaking of selves, we have lots of selves that are joining with us from all over. And we've been having this amazing discussion. And I feel like, we want to give the community some space to connect with our speakers, and they've been submitting some amazing questions. And so I would love if we can go through some of those. So Mark, again, what would you say is the number one barrier that people come across when it comes to regulating that? You talked about self-compassion, but is there one thing that you can say is a challenge for people to really kind of navigate when it comes to regulation of those feelings?
Sure. I'm going to sneak into. The first is just haven't learned the strategies. I never learned them. I didn't know what they were. I went for therapy for years and I learned a lot about my relationship with my mother, but I didn't learn how to deal with my mother. So, I think it's important to get the skill. But the one that's come up, and as a professor, I study college students as well, like Jess. And the number one strategy that we have found right now among young people is not getting enough sleep. That when you are not well rested, it's just hard to even come up with the strategy. So quality sleep, I know I sound like a preacher, but it's so, so important.
Well, that's a sermon I'm willing to listen to. I'm just saying that right there is, our bodies and minds are one. So you talked about college students. So I want to come over to Jesse again. what do you think about setting boundaries with your peers and your friends, right? That's a time where we're discovering and we're figuring it out and we're sharing or oversharing or undersharing, right? So how do you take into account that emotional intelligence or mental health may not be perceived as real by some of our friends or family members as a college student?
That's a big one. I think people often have this conversation with me where they're like, oh, everybody talks about their mental health now. Everybody's fine. It's so different. And it's not actually true. Like, if that was true, people would get care and my patients wouldn't have their parents throw out their medicine, right? So I think that there is a mistake there in like, if it's more in the ethos that we're comfortable with it, we're actually not, right? And so with college students, I think it's like the first time a lot of people are away from home and really their family and their support system becomes their friends. It might not have ever been that before. Maybe you had good friends, but it wasn't the same. And you're around them all the time, right? Which I think is really important. You don't need to be around people all the time ever. And so I think we get really worried that we're not a good friend or a good support system if we have to take a break, if we realize it's affecting us, but 100% is, because when someone's struggling, if you care about that person, you're going to feel it too, right? So you're allowed to say, this is affecting me. You're allowed to say, I need a day off of this. And there are ways to not just say, okay, I'm not talking to you anymore, but to just say, we've really been talking about this a lot. And I just wanted to let you know it's been affecting me too. And I just need a day. And I think people are very understanding of that. Sometimes when you're sick, it's hard to understand what other people are going through and they can get a little angry and that might come up, but you have to put yourself first. And just like we don't learn feelings when we're kids, we don't learn boundaries when we're kids. And both of those things would have made life a lot easier for me and every single patient that I know. So understanding that that's totally okay and no is a complete sentence is absolutely fine.
That is my mantra. I always talk about Shonda Rhimes and her year of yes and my year of no. And it is the best thing I've ever done. Sahaj, I have a question for you and it's related to this one. So I'm going to tie it together.
I wanted to jump in on that.
No worries. No, I'm going to put you right there on that train. So if we think about that from a cultural context, right? We have a question that came in around a person who has Latinx heritage. And so how do you explain that how I feel is how I feel? And sometimes it's necessary and it's nothing to be ashamed about going to get that help, especially when your family of origin may not have those same values. And how do you start that conversation, especially if you've been having maybe passive thoughts of suicide or other kinds of things that can be alarming for our families, but making it part of that conversation?
Yeah, that's definitely a question I get often. I will say the word boundaries doesn't exist in a lot of other cultures, right? That word is jarring. It feels like a wall, when in reality, when someone's asking for something they need or setting boundaries, they're allowing you to love them even deeper and more intimately. And so that reframe is a really helpful way to think about why it's important to set those boundaries in relationships. When talking to immigrant parents or, parents of different cultures, there are different things that I have found to be really useful for children of immigrants when navigating those conversations. First, in a lot of our cultures, in our pop culture, so say for me, I'm Indian, Bollywood, mental health is starting to become a conversation that is starting in Bollywood. So what I've done is be able to use pop cultural references that my parents will understand, use media in the language that they understand it. So instead of using the word depression, I might say stress. So trying to figure out what language, we co-create language in the culture, in the community, in the families that we exist in. So trying to use shared language that is understood by all parties is really essential. I would also say, as touche and stereotypical as this might sound, sometimes it can be really useful to bring in medical, statistical, science, facts to immigrant parents. Sometimes they can't even understand feelings. My dad has used woo-woo to describe it. And so when I come in with the science and the facts, and I'm like, here is a Harvard Business Review article or, a peer-reviewed journal on this, he is more willing to listen to what I have to say about mental health and how it's actually impacting people. And then, the last thing is to just see if you have any allies within your family system. Is it a sibling? Is it a cousin? Is it an uncle? For Mark, it was an uncle. Is there anyone who can be on your side as you're navigating these conversations? I will say for me, I will be very honest and say that for me, I needed to get the physical distance from my parents before I actually got the care that I needed. And by getting that care, I was then in turn able to navigate the harder conversations with my parents. And so sometimes, even though that's not an answer that is usually liked, it sometimes requires you to do the work on your own before you're ready to even start the conversation.
That is so critical, is knowing where you are and recognizing where you are on your own journey. As Jesse said earlier, we got to know where we are and what we can help and how we can help folks love us more deeply, which I thought was beautiful. So there's another question here around, making sure that we have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about tactical things we can do. We've got about 5 minutes left, and so I'm trying to choose these carefully. How do we, if we think about word choice, because taking it back to your words matter, right? How do we identify the words that we choose to destigmatize this conversation, and with that, whatever circles we're in, right? Whether that's at work or in the community, what words and what word choice, how can we choose our words carefully and more carefully as we think about destigmatizing this conversation overall? And that's open to all of you.
I'm happy to jump in really quickly. I lead a group of 60 people. And so there's a stereotype about guys being anxious. Just to put it out there, everybody, I've been anxious for 52 years. And I think that the more we have courage to show people and share how we feel, but also show that we're able to deal with those feelings, just that alone, I think, is going to make our world a better place. That I can be anxious or feel anxious, but it doesn't have to have power over me. I can also be happy and excited and optimistic. And so the more we get comfortable sharing and also showing that we can regulate, I think the better we're going to be.
Yeah, I would just add that I often notice that in healthcare workers, especially where we're supposed to just be stoic and have no feelings, people get scared that when you have to share feelings, that means you have to tell your entire history, right? Like clearly Mark has told us history before, so he's comfortable talking about it. If you've never told it before, you don't need to start there, right? You can say, I'm sad, I didn't sleep, I'm struggling. And that alone is really vulnerable. And that can connect you to each other, open the conversation to have more conversation later. And it doesn't have to be all at once.
Yes, I agree with both of those. And, I think sometimes it's okay not to have the words. I think sometimes it's about sitting in silence and just saying, hey, I feel something feels off. I'm struggling. I have used these words with my own husband to say, I don't know what it is, but I something doesn't feel right. Can you just sit with me for a few minutes? And sometimes just feeling seen and in that way and having that shared psychological, safety and emotional safety can allow you to then process and explore, what is it that I'm actually feeling? What is it that's actually going on for me? When did this start? And start to really process what's happening for you. But, coming from a culture where we don't really have the language to talk about this in the way that I've been taught in graduate school and with Western mental health, it's okay if you don't have the words. And it's okay to tie, your emotional and mental health symptoms to your body and to somatic symptoms. And I haven't been able to get rid of the stomach pain. I haven't been able to get rid of this headache. Often it's going to be tied to your brain and to your heart and to different parts of your body. So it's okay if you don't have the language, as long as, the most important thing I think here is just really reflecting and being able to be more in tune with you and all the parts of you and not shying away from that.
Yeah, now you can hear me. We have 2 minutes. And so much more that I want to ask you. So I'm going to refrain and hold back for myself from asking additional questions, except for this last one. I would love for each of you to just choose one phrase or word that's helped you know that your words matter. So think about, go into the recesses, dust off the cobwebs. And was there a phrase or one word that helped you know that your words matter?
I think for me, something that someone I love very dearly has started saying to me is that this does not make you difficult to love, has made me feel more free to express myself and choose my words, or not even filter my words when I'm talking about how I'm feeling, because I had always felt growing up that it would be a burden to share what it is I'm actually feeling or thinking. And I had internalized that for so many years that finding someone who reminds me without me having to ask to be reminded, because then that's the cycle of feeling more like a burden.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And making that space allows me to explore the words.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Jessie, Mark, one phrase or word. Yeah.
I mean, it's such a hard question. I mean, I think for me, it's like something like you matter too, like I spend a lot of time taking care of other people and I don't ever ask myself how I'm doing. And like my therapist is the person who said like, hey, wait a second, you matter in this conversation. You need a seat at the table. You have feelings too. So I think that would be what I would think.
Awesome. And Mark closes out with one. Yeah.
I'm going to use some of the research for this, which is that I learned, that the I doesn't necessarily help with regulating, that having empathy and compassion for yourself. So looking up and saying, Mark, you can do this. Mark, you can get through this. And just showing that compassion to yourself is helpful. And it really works for me. So I just want to encourage people to try it.
Well, Sahaj, Jessie, and Mark, your words did matter today. And I thank you for just sharing space with us today. And everyone that is joining us, thank you so much. We've had this amazing discussion, and many, many thanks to all of our panelists, and many thanks to you for just knowing that your words matter and being willing to be vulnerable in this space with us today. So we appreciate it. I was honored to join you all in this conversation. So let's give them our hand claps and high fives and emojis in the chat. And we appreciate all the rare reminders and the words that we heard, that we know that we have more power than we realize, and we can help to continue to change the conversation in our relationships at home and in our communities. So thank you very much to the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Krull, editor-in-chief of Allure magazine, and thank you so much for joining our fireside chat. I have with me here two amazing guests and conversationalists. First, I'm joined by Dr. Jessica Gold, psychiatrist, professor, and director in Department of Psychology at the WashU School of Medicine. And you just saw her speaking earlier. She's a Rare Beauty Mental Health Council member. So thank you, Dr. Jessie, for staying on with us and chatting with us a little bit more.
Always. Thanks for asking.
And we're also joined by Whitney Simmons, content creator, fitness enthusiast, and mental health advocate. Whitney, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
I see everyone's giving you lots of love in the chat. So we are going to get this party started. All of today, we've been learning about how our words matter and how those words and the stories that we're telling and the conversations that we have can have such a positive impact on our mental health. And I know, Whitney, you've been using your platform and your very large following to openly share your story about your mental health journey and to really be open and vulnerable with your community and using your words for good, honestly. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
And Dr. Jessie, you write often about the power of mental health and using your access to key experts and being an expert yourself to educate us. And you actually really helped out creating the Rare Beauty Mental Health Media Guide, which, as a journalist, have been reading avidly since it came out over the last couple of days, because I do think language is so important, and how you address people and how they want to be addressed is so essential to removing the stigma around mental health, and not making those people feel othered or lesser than. And I think that's so important. So we're going to start off with some questions. Whitney, I would love to ask you, you recently began sharing more openly about your own mental health journey on your social following and with your community.
Yeah.
So what made you begin to have those conversations? And I know it took so much strength.
Yeah.
And to come out and really say those things to millions of people, what made you do that?
I give a lot of credit to my direct support system.
Mhm.
And I had really suffered in silence for a really long time. And when you share so much of your life online, this became such a huge part of my life. And to feel like I was hiding something that was so important to me and what I've been working through, it didn't feel true to me anymore. And so with the support of an amazing friend, I sat down on her podcast and she really pushed me to just sit down and share my story, which was very nerve-wracking because I didn't know how people were going to react. And I felt like it was going to kind of come out of nowhere. And so I was very nervous about it. And after we filmed the podcast and I listened back to it, I actually asked her not to post it. But she just really pushed me to do it. And she was like, you don't know if sharing your story can help others. And so that was the big push that I needed. And since then, it's been very heavily talked about over on my platform. I'm very passionate about it. So it's important. I've had such an amazing response from the amazing women in my community. And now it's a heavy topic of discussion over there.
Well, I think it's so interesting that you said that you were hesitant. Even once you'd done it, you were like, oh, wait, I can't. I want to back away from that. And I find that that's exactly what social media does to us, right? Social media is a highlight reel, and you always hear that. But then when you're creating content, you'll say to yourself, oh, I was going to go there, but now I'm watching it back and I just hate it so much. You critique yourself to every little, I shouldn't have said that word. I shouldn't have said this word.
Absolutely.
So I'm so glad that you said that you were, even after you filmed it, you were like, no, we're not going to post this. And then you had that advocate and that friend there to encourage you. What do you suggest other people who are looking, feeling that pressure, I think, from social media to be perfect, to not show this side of themselves? What do you recommend that they do if they're ready to share or thinking about sharing?
Yeah, I think it's so important to remember that sharing your personal story creates connection, and your words matter. Your words are so important, and your story can help others. And I was so hesitant because I didn't know if my story was important. I didn't know if anyone felt the same way that I felt, but there are so many people that feel exactly how you are feeling. And it is so important to share that message when you feel ready. And it brings so much connection and healing and hope to people that might be feeling alone right now.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Jessie, Whitney's talking a little bit about reactions. And when we are on social media, we open ourselves up to reactions, whether they be good or bad. I would love to hear you tell us a little bit about, how social media and how online platforms, how they have changed the landscape of the mental health industry over time.
It's a big question. First, I want to say thanks to Whitney for sharing her story, because it's really important to me to see people with big followings feel comfortable enough sharing. She also said when you feel ready. And I think that part is really important for people to hear, which is that like you can share and you could share in the future too. So make sure that you kind of see where you're feeling with that. I think social media in general has made us feel more connected to people, but sometimes we don't actually know the people. So it's easy for Whitney to say, like, my friend who I know told me to put this up and they pushed me and I knew it was the right kind of pushing. But if you're in a situation where, you're just surrounded by people who you know from social, but they're not people you've like really connected to, there's a lot of difference in that relationship. And so you feel the pressure to share, to be authentic, but you don't owe anybody your story, right? Like it is still your story. What you choose to share of your story is too, right? Like I talk about going to therapy all the time and I didn't ever talk about being on medication for years. And I'm a person who prescribes medication, right? But I realized that I just hadn't been doing it and I paid attention to it, reflected on it, actually went to therapy on that myself to try to figure it out and realized that like I was holding that back for a reason. I ultimately obviously shared that, but I think it's important that it's not just like you have to share because you do. And you can tell on social, like self-disclosure is great. The way that that's changed the landscape in mental health is amazing. For me to have somebody point to someone like Whitney and say like, look what they did. Now I feel like I've had the same symptoms. I had the same experience. I feel okay getting help because she did. Like that experience has magnified with social media, right? Before social media, you had publicists who were in charge of that and deciding who the image, like how to control the image and where to put that and it's a lot less accessible and from the person, right? And so we're getting a lot more people saying like, actually, this is my real life and this is what I've been struggling with. And I think it's doing really great things to people getting help or at least feeling comfortable starting the conversation.
Yeah, that's so true. I think a lot of times because social media is just one aspect of a person's life for the most part, people don't see what's behind the scenes. For example, I'm editor-in-chief, and one thing I always drop in my conversation is, oh, me and my therapist? My therapist? Oh yeah, my therapist said. I try to let everyone know that I go to therapy. Like everyone at Allure knows that I go to therapy because I think it's very important that people see you've reached this high position, you're going on, fancy trips, you're doing this. But in order to do that, I go to therapy every 2 weeks. I take Lexapro every morning. And I have all of these things that help me achieve. And it's not just like I work hard and keep my head down and I shot to the top. No, it took a lot of help and assistance to keep my mental health in a good place. And we also don't talk about sometimes how these jobs affect our mental health, right? I had to go up on my prescription because I was like, wait a minute, this is a tough gig. I need a little extra help. Mm-hmm. And so I think those are things that we can be much more open about via social media. So it doesn't just seem like everything's all dandy and perfect. And, granted, I'm not going to share me crying in the corner.
But you could, right?
I could.
So, I mean, I think that, we were saying a little, what has COVID done to that? And I think that that's also made it so people don't feel like they have to be perfect all the time because we're all at home. Our dogs are barking. Our life is out of control. I want to wear sweatpants all the time, right? But that's what all of our lives is. And like, you can't have this conversation where like this person's life is so different because we've all been struggling and there's so much that normalized that over COVID. And I think took off the facade a bit of some of the people that were trying to control their image so much and made it just easier for people to be like, turns out this is hard and that's okay. And that's a strength for me to say out loud,
Whitney, do you feel like the pandemic made you feel more comfortable to share or do you feel that changed the way you saw your social media presence?
What's crazy is I've always struggled with mental health, but I really hit a couple of things happened over the pandemic that really escalated my mental health. And so it became a huge center focus for me. And so, the pandemic for me is really, it's allowed me to be more open and honest because there are so many people. It put all of us in such an unknown territory in our lives. And so many of us were in that same position, feeling very uneasy. And so it definitely allowed me and helped me feel a little bit more safe sharing my story online.
I appreciate you sharing that, because I think in the pandemic, we were kind of in a state of joint distress, right? It was a mutual, so much was happening. And I think that opened up the door a little bit for these conversations to be normalized, right? Now it's normal to say, look, being at home and being isolated, I'm so, I'm not feeling well. I'm not feeling like I should. I'm feeling a little depressed, and growing those coping mechanisms. I think now that we're starting to come back into the world, we're also dealing with a change, right? I feel like during the pandemic, I got together such good coping mechanisms. I was riding my bike in the park. I was going to the gym. I was cooking all the time, eating right, journaling. And then you come back to the office with the commute and you're like, I don't have time for that anymore. So for you, what do you think, Dr. Jessie, what do you think is going to change now that we're coming out and back into the world?
Oh, big question again. I think that we have this belief that everything is now normal, right? That we can just go back and pretend that the past 2 years didn't happen, and work is going to be the same, and interacting with friends and family is going to be the same. It's not, right? So I think we have to start with that, which is there's going to be an adjustment because you had to adjust in the first place. And a lot of stuff happened, right? So maybe everything didn't happen to you, but you witnessed it, you read it, you existed in a society that was talking a lot about it. You just like sponge absorbed it, right? So there's a lot of time to like let out the sponge, right? And it's not going to be really easy, and that's okay, right? So I think there's a lot of like, speaking of media and social media, just like, yay, we're fine, like go back to normal. And it's okay if you don't resonate with that message, because it actually doesn't make sense. If you're fine, you're fine, and that's all right. But it's also okay if this isn't an easy thing for you and there's a struggle to transition, right? If there was a struggle to transition on the one end, there probably will be on this one too, right? So you talked about coping skills. So like for me, I'm an extrovert. Literally, you took away my job, which is talking to people, and socializing, which was like my majority coping skill. And so I spent 2 years trying to figure out how to enjoy my own company for coping's sake, right? And like, that's a hard thing. And now I can have people again. And it's exhausting to be around people despite being an extrovert, right? So it's like, how do you say like, that's okay. It turns out I don't need to be around people all the time and I can handle my own stuff. And I think that's going to be an adjustment for people.
Yeah, creating a new balance.
I would definitely say that's something I've been struggling more so with, as I am an introvert. So the transition for me was very easy. And now I'm, trying to navigate, okay, so I'm coming out of this pandemic with newly diagnosed depression. I am on medication. I am still in weekly therapy. I am still doing these things every single week. So how do I transition back into a different life for me right now? And so it's definitely something that I've been struggling with, that transition. And I think it's also important to remember it takes time. And so I've been really focusing on giving myself grace as I am beginning this new journey. And it's a journey that I'm on and pushing through, but we'll get through it. I know it.
I love that phrase that you use. And it's a phrase I use to myself often. Give yourself grace.
Yes.
You're oftentimes our worst critics. For me, part of my anxiety was my own pressure on myself to be perfect, to be really great at what I do, to not show others how I was struggling, right? And it was myself in my head. No one else was putting that pressure on me. And so I think I always try to say, when something doesn't go quite like I would have hoped, I say, you have to give yourself grace. Absolutely. And you also have to think about all the things that are happening, right? There's only one piece of your life. You might have family things going on. You might have personal things going on, in addition to work things. All these things come together and can mean that your day gets derailed or something went off the rails, but it's still probably going pretty well. One thing, Dr. Jessie, I would love to talk more about is, okay, if you do decide that you're ready, and you want to be vulnerable and you want to talk to your family or close friends, or even, the world, opening up to social media, what are some steps that you can take as you get ready to have those conversations? Are there some words or tactics that we could use before we have these conversations and open ourselves up to the world?
Yeah, I think that first of all, it's important to acknowledge that it's not an easy thing, right? So all of the things that you're feeling about talking to people is a normal experience, because if you've never talked about it, even to your closest friends, even to a doctor, it's going to be hard to finally say, like, this is what's going on in my life, right? And talk to people about it. So I just want to acknowledge that. And then, I think where you do it and who you do it with is important. I think, there are different locations that you can have conversations with friends too and family, which feel more private. I think that finding a place where you feel comfortable, where the situation feels safe with a person you feel safe with, is probably one of the most important things, because knowing that at least the person has some awareness or is going to react in a way that you feel will be helpful is usually a good person to start with. You might end up having to tell someone that isn't a person you get along with as well, or you have different opinions from, or your parent, right? That might be a harder conversation sometimes. But for the very first time of talking about it, that person who's your person, find them, talk to them, say, I have something I need to tell you. And this is, just tell them, I think feelings is a good place to start. You might not have to tell them, I said in the last session, like your entire mental health history, like that's scary. Like saying we've been on medication, like every single person on this panel just said that. It is not a common thing for people to talk about, right? Like therapy is a lot more normalized than medicine. So I think, realizing that you can say to your friend, like, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I feel like I'm struggling. Or I've noticed that I'm not doing work as well as I could, or I'm not going to school as much as I want to. And I don't know what it is, but I'd like to talk about it. And I think just really setting the stage for that conversation in an open way with a person that you really know is a person you can trust is usually the best place to start.
Whitney, you kind of started this conversation talking about this friend of yours who really seemed to be your safe space to have this conversation. I would love to hear, what did this person do for you? How did they make you feel safe for those people who might be trying to create a safe space for their friends?
Well, what's crazy is she's not only my best friend, but she's also my hairdresser. And, the feelings, those start to come out when you're sitting in the chair.
Yes.
And I really had the first realization that I needed help sitting in her chair, because she was just listening. And there's so much power in just listening. And I didn't know how I was feeling. Like Dr. Jessie said, I didn't understand my feelings. I didn't understand why I was feeling this way. I didn't understand why I wasn't doing as well at work as I used to, or as active as I used to be. And so just sitting there and having her listen to me and me just kind of talk is what really initiated the process for me. I kind of reached that point where I was alone in my own head for so long, and I was really in denial. I didn't want to accept or even understand that I needed help and I needed somebody just to talk to. And talking to her was that first initial step for me, where I got all of my feelings out, and I was like, I need to do this more often. I need to find help. And there are so many people willing to help and to listen. And so that was the first step for me. She was just a great listener.
The hairstylist has always been a great place for therapy. Like, they're so good at being like, oh, really? Oh my goodness. Well, they're just like,
yes,
they're great at passing along information. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I got into beauty and I'm the editor-in-chief of Allure, is because that community that you create at the hair salon is just such a good one. And I'm so glad to hear that your stylist supported you in that way.
I was sitting there in tears, and she had my back and my hair.
And your hair, and was like, let me hold your hair back, and you don't want to mess out your blowout with those salty tears. Oh, I love that. Dr. Jessie, if we're planning to be allies, right? If we want to be good listeners for people who are ready to tell their stories, what can we do to be better at listening and being allies and pointing people in the right direction if they're ready to share?
Yeah, so nobody teaches you how to respond to a friend who's struggling, and nobody teaches you how to be a friend. Some of that is innate, right? Like we've just been around people and made friends our life, and we know what that feels like or what we would want from someone else, right? But I think the main thing is what Whitney said, which is like, listen. So we have a lot of urges when people are talking. In the last session, I said our urges to give advice, right? And so when someone's struggling, most of the time, they just want to talk. There are some times that they want an action or you to do something about it. But most of the time, they just want a person to be there to bear witness to whatever they experienced and to say, like, you're there and you will be there for them and you will check in on them because they told you that, right? It's mostly what I do in my job, right? So I think people think you go to therapy and like people are going to like magic wand change everything you do about your life. But in a lot of ways, like what I do is listen. And for most of the pandemic, I struggled a lot with the fact that people's stressors were things I couldn't fix. Like I couldn't give people their jobs back or change the way jobs were. I couldn't make them healthy. And not that I ever did that before, it was just a lot more prevalent in my mind. And so I was like, I'm not doing this right. And my therapist was like, but you don't have to fix them. Like you're just there. Who else is there? And I was like, that makes sense, right? And that's what you do as a friend. Like, you're just there. You don't have to fix it.
That is such a good point. I think I'm definitely a type A fixer. Oh, I love to fix. Oh, I love to be like, okay, solution is this, which is really good at work. But, you know, over this pandemic, I had a family member who was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and was really struggling, and wanting to jump in and fix it wasn't quite the solution, right? And it really became hard for me as that fixer in the family. But then I think one thing I would love for us to talk a little bit about is how those people around those people who are dealing with a recent diagnosis or a mental illness or a not diagnosed mental illness, what do we do when we know someone needs help, but they're resistant to getting help? Is there anything that we can do? Do we just step back and listen? Or, you know, what can we do, Dr. Jessie? I don't know.
Oh, you know, there are limits to everything, right? So we wish that like when someone's struggling that we can make it all better or that we can get them to help right away. But some of that is a choice, right? Like they have to want help. Of course, there are reasons that becomes more complicated in my job where you might be watching and saying, I've been in a situation where I got help I didn't really want at the time, but hopefully it helped you ultimately if you were in a hospital setting. I mean, I think that what we're really doing is just saying like, I'm here, I will be here, I will help you as much as I can. And if I can't, because it's like really affecting me, which makes sense, that's also okay. And so having the ability to balance both things and say like, if somebody's struggling, I'm going to do what I can to be there for them, give them help if they want it, help in any way that they ask for it, or I can ask them if I can give them suggestions, you know, but in the same respect, like I am human, I care about my friends. So if my friends are sad, so am I. If my family's sick, so am I, right? And I'm allowed to have feelings about that and manage them on my own. So lots of people who are caretakers need to go to therapy themselves, right? Like you might be saying like, well, I've never struggled, which awesome. Congratulations. Actually, that's great. And I think that happens for some people, right? But sometimes like your friends are struggling, your family is struggling, and all of a sudden you're like, something's wrong with me now because I've been holding all of their stuff. And they really do put it on you. That's what I do in my job too. So it's like, hold that for people, right? And so you're allowed to have that affect you. Like you're a human too. So you can have boundaries and an effect of other people's lives on yours.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that because I think it's about creating boundaries sometimes, right? You pour into other people, you hold things for other people, but then every once in a while you have to say, whoa, it is too heavy. For my mental health, I need to drop some of this other stuff and focus in on me because I can't help others if I'm not at my best. So I really appreciate you saying that as someone who dabbles in and is helping as a caretaker and a family member who's had to endure sometimes, you know, someone who's still trying to be ready. I think that is such a good thing to hear. That we're not always perfect as caretakers, as friends, as allies, but we do our best because we do it out of love.
I think one thing that comes to mind with this discussion is my friends and family, they didn't know. And so, when I talk to them after a long time of suffering in silence, after talking to them, they don't know how to help, and that's okay. But just knowing that they are there and they are listening and they're supportive, and if they need to set boundaries and take breaks when they need to, it's still so, it's been so important and so helpful to me in my journey. So
thank you. That's so good to say. I would love for us, as we're wrapping up here, for us all to share kind of, what are some things that we do to take care of our own mental health, right? And some of those coping mechanisms that we talked about earlier. How do we stay on top of it? I would also love for you each to share what speaking out has done for you personally. How has that helped you? Whitney, let's start with you.
So speaking out for me personally has truly brought so much healing and connection into my life. I know I touched on that earlier, but when you're struggling, for me, when I was struggling with depression, I do feel very alone. And so it was hard to share my story. And once I was ready to share it, and you start talking to people and you receive messages and you feel so understood. So it brought a lot of understanding into my life, and it brought a lot of just true deep connection and healing. Just a simple message to somebody saying, we're here for you. We understand. I feel this exact same way. It takes 5 seconds out of your day to do that. And it truly has brought so much healing and love into my life. So I'm so grateful for every single person who's gone out of their way to interact on my page with people who are struggling, because so many of us are struggling, and sharing that does bring such a deep connection. So for me, my biggest thing, that as we've been transitioning back into being in the office, working every day, into this new way of life, I have promised myself that rain, snow, sunshine, I am on a walk every single day. Sometimes it'll be at 9 p.m. and I drag Stefan with me. And I always bring my dogs with me unless it's raining. I'll leave them behind because I don't like the rain. But I will force myself every single day, even if I don't want to. And I'm like stomping, getting outside. By the end of that 30-minute, 45-minute walk, I feel a million times better. I'm off my phone. It is a breath of fresh air that has become so important to me, especially if I'm running late and I don't have time to journal. That's been number one for me. And the biggest help for me is getting outside and just walking and putting my phone down.
Thank you so much. Disconnecting is such a good tip. Dr. Jessie, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about when she was talking about sharing her story, how she felt alone before. And also depression itself makes you feel alone. Like that's a symptom. So it feeds on itself, right? So if you aren't talking with anybody about it, your brain is also saying you're alone, like lots of pretty negative thoughts about yourself, and it just compounds. So keep in mind that that's also probably the disease talking at some point. I think that for me, sharing about mental health as a healthcare worker who actually sees healthcare workers has been similarly important to be authentic for me, because it seems unfair to say, go get help when I'm not, or yeah, sure, come in my office, and I'm doing the exact opposite of things. So I think it's important to share that healers are imperfect too, and that it's okay that I am. And I feel like the reception has been good for a field that doesn't talk a lot about their mental health either. And I think, there's an occasional troll or so, but not so bad, which has been really nice about mental health sharing on social, especially for me, but through writing in general. In terms of things I do for my mental health, so therapy is number one for me. I go every week. The second is actually stopping and asking myself how I'm doing throughout the day. So I'm really bad at the like brain body connection, which it might seem weird to you because that's like basically my entire job. But you know, when you work and all you do is work all day, you just get used to ignoring both. So you don't listen to physical cues, you don't listen to mental cues, and you just kind of exist and keep powering through, right? And so I've been spending a lot of time just stopping and saying like, wait, how am I feeling? Like both physically and mentally, and just saying those feelings out loud and like leaving space for that, not judging them, not trying to fix them, not trying to make any sort of crazy inference off of it. You know, like it in a lot of ways, we just are dealing. And so that's what I'm trying to do, make space to deal and count myself in the conversation.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'll add, for me, I think sharing my story with my family members, because I think someone in the chat said how sharing with family is the hardest part. And it is. I come from a Southern Baptist family. Therapy isn't a thing, right? And my mother also deals with bipolar disorder. And so she felt very isolated within her family because they didn't support her. And so when I went to her and told her that I also was feeling anxious and, I didn't know what was going on and I wanted to go to therapy, we created such a tighter bond. And I literally can call my mom almost at any time of day and be like, I don't feel good. And she'll be like, I know. And that's it. I don't have to explain what I'm feeling. I don't have to say why I'm feeling bad. It's just that I feel kind of weird today. And she's like, oh, me too. And that's such a great thing to have, I think, in someone who's close to you. And I think my friends have also been very supportive and working through and being able to say, Jessica, this is your anxiety speaking. You are doing actually really well, gain some perspective. So I think that it's brought me closer to my own friends and family by being able to share, and we create this own new generation of acceptance that this past generation might not have had. And that has been so grateful and helpful for me. And as far as coping mechanisms, I'll have to say more medication, sleeping pills. Actually, my psychiatrist prescribed me sleeping pills. And that has helped me so much because I'm that person that when I lay down, everything descends. Every thought is something I should be doing, something I forgot to do, something I'm like, that's been buried all day since I've been moving, but then pops up there at night. Yeah. And so being able to take that sleeping medication has made it so much better because I'm sleeping through the night. I can start the day with a fresh brain instead of being so tired all the time.
Yes. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I need some of those.
Well, I'll Dr. Jessie's gonna hook us up after this.
I mean, that is not my job of being on this panel, but I will say like sleep, and Mark brought this up in the last panel too, which is like, we take for granted how much sleep influences our life. Like I, as a person who talks about this stuff a lot in patients, is like, okay, you should sleep. And people are like, thanks. That's like telling me to go eat healthier or something, right? It's just like a thing doctors say. But when I don't sleep, I'm angry. Or if I don't sleep, like I don't do work as well. But it takes me a while to realize that. And sleep is a really big thing if you pay attention, that you can actually change, if possible, rather quickly to make it better, and you will feel better, and that's nice. It's not a thing that happens really easily with other things.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you both so much, Dr. Jessie and Whitney, for being with us today and talking all about your personal stories and being so open and vulnerable with us. We really appreciate that. And I hope everyone watching enjoys the rest of the panel. And that's it for our fireside chat.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
I'm so honored to introduce our last and final speaker, Jay Shetty. Jay is the #1 New York Times best-selling author, purpose coach, former monk, host of the #1 health and wellness podcast, On Purpose, and co-founder of Sama Tea, with a myriad of accolades under his belt. His podcast, On Purpose, was named a 2022 People's Voice winner at the Webby Awards. In 2019, Adweek dubbed him a Young Influential's cover star, describing him as an emanation of spiritual force. In 2017, Forbes named him to the 30 under 30 list for being a game changer in media. People magazine has named him one to watch. In 2018 and 2019, the Streamies named him the best health and wellness creator of the year. His videos have been viewed more than 8 billion times, and he is followed by over 40 million people across social media. In a first of its kind role, Jay was named Chief Purpose Officer of Calm at the beginning of 2022. He joined the popular app's daily meditation roster with his first content series, The Daily J, a 7-minute daily mindfulness session inclusive of an uplifting monologue, short meditation, and actionable life insight. Additionally, he plays a key role in expanding Calm's reach in the business sphere by helping organizations across the globe bring mindfulness to the forefront of workplace culture, furthering the brand's mission to make the world a healthier and happier place. In 2019, Jay created On Purpose, which is now the world's #1 health and wellness podcast, and its opening year ranked #1 on Spotify, in India, and in Apple's top 20 podcasts of the year. Guests have included talent and icons from various backgrounds, such as Alicia Keys, Jennifer Lopez, Oprah Winfrey, among others. Jay's book debuted Think Like a Monk, Train Your Mind for Peace and Purpose Every Day, at #1 on both the New York Times and the Sunday Times bestseller list, and was deemed unputdownable by Amazon, where it held the #1 spot worldwide. When Jay isn't writing or making videos, he's coaching as the founder of the Shetty Certification School, a purpose-driven educational institution offering accredited certifications in life coaching to individuals and organizations. He's been a keynote speaker around the world on global stages on behalf of powerhouses like Google, Microsoft, Netflix, HSBC, and has developed corporate training programs for many of these organizational clients. His online courses have been attended by over 2 million students, and his Genius community provides weekly programming on the principles and practices for health and wellness to thousands of members in over 100 countries. Please join me in welcoming Jay Shetty. Jay, thank you so much for taking the time and spending time with us today, and for being a powerful voice in all of this work. I am, like many of us here today, a huge fan of yours, and of course, an avid podcast listener. You've been such an inspiration to so many people, whether through your podcast, your book, your public speaking events, and your story, or at least what I've been able to read and learn about it, is so fascinating. Can you start by just sharing with our audience a little bit about your journey to the work that you're doing today?
Well, first of all, I'm so grateful and honored to be here. I'm such a fan and admirer of the incredible impact that you're all having. So I feel really deeply honored to be with you all today. And I'll try and give you a short version. It's difficult to try and squash the last 10 to 12 years into 30 seconds, but I'll do my best. My journey began as a student in London who was inquisitive and curious, but didn't know where to start. And so I would go and hear celebrities and entrepreneurs and CEOs and speakers about how they'd broken through difficult times, or how they'd overcome failure, and how they'd overcome challenges in their lives. And once I ended up stumbling on hearing a monk speak. And hearing this monk speak was one of the most life-changing, life-altering moments of my life, because he was the first person that spoke about the need for service. He spoke about the need for impact. He spoke about the need for contribution to the lives of others. And 18-year-old me was completely awestruck about that concept, and decided to spend 3 years living as a monk when I graduated from business school in India and across Europe. And during that time, I built up some incredible mental health habits without even knowing that's what they were. I developed some really great tools and insights to how to understand my emotions and my feelings and how to process them without knowing that that's what I would do in the future. And today, my biggest goal is to share those lessons I learned from my mentors, my teachers, from the guides and coaches that I studied with, and try and make them relevant, accessible to everyone in the world. So when people ask me what I do, I describe it as wanting to help everyone in the world find their purpose and live up to their potential. And that's what I'm dedicated to. That's what my work is dedicated to. And it's come from a place of having been truly gifted with some amazing teachers and guides, and wanting to share that with the world.
I love that. And you better believe we will be coming back to that question later on so that you can share some of those tips and wisdom with everyone in the audience today. So thank you for sharing that. I love that. So as you know, we kicked off a campaign for Mental Health Awareness Month called Your Words Matter. And we've spent the morning talking about how powerful words are, specifically as they relate to talking about mental health. They can have a real impact on ourselves and those around us. And you have openly shared and taught millions of people about the power of words through your work. I recently listened to a talk of yours on why words are more powerful than you think. Can you tell us a little bit more about this? Why are words more powerful than we may think?
Absolutely. Well, words are not just words, they're ideas, they're concepts. The definition of a word defines how it moves us. You could hear a word that triggers you or transforms you. You could hear a word that discourages you or empowers you based on how you've interacted with that word in the past. The same word can be seen so differently by so many different people. Let's even take a word like love, right? A word like love that feels universal, that feels like we should all have the same definition for it. Well, someone could say, I love you, and they want to spend the rest of their life with you. And someone could say, I love you, and it doesn't always mean that. And so we find that even a word like love can have so many definitions and meanings. So words matter even more the more they're used, the more accessible they are. Now, I came across this amazing study a few years ago that really made sense of this. And it was conducted by Harvard, and it was about emotional vocabulary. And they called it the emotions list, but I look at it as emotional vocabulary. And they said that there are 5 ways most of us respond to the common question, how are you? And the 5 words are good, bad, fine, okay, So, how's your day? Good. How are you feeling? Okay. How you doing? Bad. What are you looking forward to next week? I don't know. Like we have very limited amount of words we use to describe our emotions. And what Harvard does, and you can Google this after this session, you can Google emotions list Harvard on Google, and it will come up with a table. And in that table, it will give you multiple words that describe a feeling in more depth. So when you're feeling sad, are you sad or are you feeling irritated or angry or offended? It goes deeper into the emotion. And what that does is when we can diagnose how we feel more deeply, we can communicate that more effectively to the people we love in our lives. And when the people we love in our lives understand this, they're able to better understand our emotions as well. So words carry meaning, they carry ideas, they carry feelings. And I really believe that we can all expand our emotional vocabulary to have healthier discussions.
I love that. And earlier today, we heard a little bit from Dr. Mark Brackett, who also sits on our Rare Beauty Mental Health Council. And he talks all about emotional intelligence and understanding emotions. And one of the things he always starts with is he'll say, how are you? And then he'll say, no, how are you really?
Yes.
So that we really get an actual answer that's not just, fine, maybe, okay. So I love that. So a recurring theme in a lot of your work, it is how words can impact our reality. And in one of your videos, you shared a story around the power of words, and you left us with this takeaway, and I'm going to read it word for word so I don't mess it up. If one word has such power to make you so angry and hot, may not another word have the power to heal? Our words have more power than we believe. Our words have the power to impact our reality. We need to pick them carefully and make sure you taste your words before you spit them out. That's a powerful statement. How can all of us just be a little bit more mindful about our words in today's digital, fast-paced world?
That's such a great question. And it's such a big challenge when I feel like we read words, hear words, see words all day. And it can feel like words are free and they somewhat feel free, right? It feels free to spend words. You don't think about that. You don't go, imagine there was a limit on how many words you could speak based on how much time it cost or how much money it cost and how much more valuable you'd feel about them. But even deeper than a currency of money or time is the currency of someone's feelings. And I think what really makes us reflect, for me especially, is in the book that I studied as a monk. It's called the Gita. There's something inside of it called the 4 guidelines for speech. And these guidelines really are gateways or doors that I try and walk through. And I'll explain what they are. So the first one is this truthful? Right? Is this truthful? Is what I'm about to say truthful? And the truth today is really hard to decipher. From this perspective, it would be, is it factual? Have we done the research? Have we actually asked the questions? Have we looked into this extremely deeply? Do we actually know? Have we given it time to digest? So the first thing before we say something or write something or whatever it may be is this truly factual? And if it isn't, let's go do the research. Let's go find the facts. The second is the way I'm going to share it beneficial to everyone? This I found so fascinating because it doesn't mean you can't say it. It's asking you to say, are you saying it in a way that will be beneficial to a lot of people? Sometimes you can say the truth, but in a way that no one can digest it. And that's sad because then the truth doesn't get to win just because of the casing that you put it inside of. The third question that you have to ask yourself before you speak is this going to agitate anyone's mind? Is this going to irritate anyone? And this is a great question. Again, it's not saying don't say things that are sometimes going to agitate others or irritate others, but are we aware of that? Are we conscious of that? And are we open to the fact that there may be someone who may disagree with this or may have some discomfort to this? And are we prepared to also answer that? And the fourth and final one is ultimately, is what we're saying coming from a good place in our heart? Is it coming from a good intention within our heart? Or is it coming from what we know to be our lower selves and not our higher selves? So to me, those are really great questions to almost use as little doorways and gateways before we speak.
I love that. If all of us just took those few minutes before we say something to connect our mind with our words, I feel like we would just live in a much more peaceful and joyful space. And I think so much of what you said is so relevant today with the growth of social media and how quickly people can post something, say something, and not think through the impact that it has on millions of people. I love that. Okay, so we're going to come to those tips and practices that you mentioned. So in your book, Think Like a Monk, you shared that we have about 70 to 80,000 thoughts per day, and 80% of those thoughts are negative. Wow. So with current events, a global pandemic, among other things going on, more and more people are commonly experiencing anxiety, stress, and negative thoughts and outlooks. What are some of the tips and practices that you've learned that all of us can do to help us deal with our daily realities to foster mental well-being?
So what I love about having this conversation with you is that if you think about our thoughts, they're words. Our thoughts are words, right? I feel a certain way, or I'm thinking about this, or I'm worried about this. Like, thoughts are words. And not only do we have 70 to 80,000 thoughts per day and 80% are negative, we find that 80% are repetitive. So it's often the same thoughts that are going round and round and round in our minds. And we often have the same thoughts at the same time of day. So we often have the same thoughts before we go to bed, the same thoughts before when we wake up. And so some of my practices would include making sure that the first thought of the day and the last thought of the day are consciously selected. You may not be able to control the 79,998 thoughts throughout the day, but if we can start to feel a sense of control over the first thought of the day, and the last thought of the day, it can truly plant a seed that can change our life. And so when I wake up in the morning, I always want my first thought, my first seed of a thought, to be a grateful thought. So for a long time, what I had is I had a little Post-it note on the side of my bed, and it said, "What are you grateful for?" And it would be the first thing I would see. Or I had a paragraph from my favorite book open on my bedside table. So I'd wake up and I'd read the first 3 lines. Or you have your favorite song with your favorite lyrics that comes on first thing in the morning. So then songs and music are a great way of programming your mind to have a healthy thought. So it doesn't just have to be reading, it can be listening as well. And finally, it could be a work of art. There may be a picture on your phone, or there may be a picture on your wall that makes you feel a great thought. So make sure that the first thought of the day and the last thought of the day are powerful, are grateful, are positive, and those thoughts will start to have a ripple effect as they start to multiply. I could give lots more advice, but I think that one's a really great, simple, practical one that people can start on.
I love that one. And I'm proud to say that I'm trying that. I started using the 5-minute journal a couple of months ago. So the prompts are the same every morning and every evening, and they prompt you to do exactly that. And it says, no matter how tired you are, no matter how busy you are, let this be the first and the last thing you do. So I'm trying to do that.
That's amazing.
Okay, so we just have one question to close us out. And that is that you are, of course, someone who has positively influenced millions of people through the power of your own words. And whether we have a platform of millions like you, or a following like our founder, Selena, or we're just in conversation with a family member or friends, how can each of us thoughtfully influence others when it comes to choosing words with intention?
I think some of our greatest influence happens not by speaking, but by listening. And I think often the words that matter the most are not the words we used, but the words we hear from others. And so I find that when I'm with my friends, or when I'm with my family, or when I'm in those intimate groups, or whether I'm on social media and online, I spend a lot of time listening and hearing the words that other people are using. I think words that other people use can let you know how they feel. I think words that other people don't use can let you know how they feel, words they miss or skip as well, words that are not mentioned. I just had this experience yesterday where I was speaking to my team on a Zoom call, and one of the members of my team who I've worked with for maybe 2.5 years now, I asked her how she was doing and how she was really doing, and she was still hesitant to share. And I realized in that moment that there was nothing I could say to make her share something with me, and that could feel intimidating in that group setting. And so all I said to her was, I just want you to know I'm here for you if you need anything. And I realized that me not saying anything else apart from those words was actually able to open up the space for her to tell me that there's fires in her area and she's worried about her children and their safety. And it wasn't that my words could fix her situation. I think we often think about words fixing things or solving things. I don't believe words fix and solve things. I believe they hold and heal things in people. And so words are there to hold space and heal, not to fix and solve. And often that begins by listening and hearing first. I hope that answers your question. And I'm so grateful for this beautiful initiative and this amazing impact that you're leading, and this incredible conversation on words. I've been doing this work for a long, long time, and I don't think anyone's ever dedicated an entire event to words. And so I love you all for doing it. I congratulate you for it, and I feel so honored to be a small part of it.
Well, thank you so much. This was such a beautiful, wonderful, and inspirational way to close out this event. We're so grateful for your time and appreciate your responses. And I can't wait to start using those 4 guidelines that you shared with all of us. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It was such an honor, and hope to see you all soon.
Thank you all so much for joining us. I know we ran a couple minutes over time, but I hope it was worth it. I want to thank each and every one of our speakers today: Tremaine, Jessica, Siobhan, Whitney, Jay, Mark Brackett, Zahaj, Dr. Jesse. Your enthusiasm that you brought to this event and your expertise did not go unnoticed, so thank you. And to our incredible community who joined us here. Community and connection is so important to all of us here at Rare Beauty, and we feel so lucky to have the power of our community and all of you and the enthusiasm and excitement in the chat for the last 2 hours. We hope you'll follow along as we share more resources with you all month and of course all year long through Rare Beauty. Thanks everyone.